Hey guys. So I wanted to talk about the Brian Shaffer case a little bit. I wanted to cover things that are not that well reported because I think every single video, there's only so many ways you can tell a story. So every video has covered exactly what happened that night. But the updates and the interviews with the detectives and friends and things like that are a little less, you have to do a little bit more digging. So I wanted to kind of just condense all that. And, I went totally down the rabbit hole in this one. This is by far, and a lot of people say this, the most confusing missing persons case. Missing persons cases to me are very they bother me. I can't watch them before bed. I'll go and think about this person and where are they and are they okay and what happened to them. A lot of times I feel like I can kind of guess, and you guys know too, like some people you can figure out like what road that went down, and you kind of are like, there's, you don't know for sure, but it really looks like this happened. Well, in this case, everything's possible and nothing's likely, but one of those things did happen. So that's why I think that this is, something that people kind of pick apart, and they just want to know, they just want to know what happened to this guy and how it's possible. And I think there's some fear that that can happen to us too. It's like one of your worst nightmares to walk out of your house and never walk into it again, just vanish into thin air. Which is very hard to do now, but it, of course it happens. There's missing people on the news now, or there's a lady missing in where I live now. So, it happens, and sometimes people are never found, and it's so sad. I can't even imagine for his family. But so, talking about the family, well, to start, and just a really, really, really quick recap. And if you don't know the story, there's a million other videos you can watch that will tell you the absolute play-by-play, but I'm going to go through this really fast. So Brian was a 27-year-old student at Ohio State University. He was a med student. Normal guy. He liked hanging out with friends. He liked music. He, just the same as everyone else doing their thing, It looked like he had a good future. He had a girlfriend. He, but he was going through some things at this point when he went missing. His mother had just passed away 3 weeks earlier, and he was very close to her. So to me, you can't really take that out of this story. I think that means something. I do. But so this night, he decides to go out with his friends. And like I said, this was 3 weeks after her passing. They had just finished exams. He was getting ready to go on a trip that his mother had purchased for he and his girlfriend. And he went out this night with a friend of his, and they had a little rocky past. They were roommates for a very short amount of time and figured out they couldn't live together. But I guess they had chose to keep hanging out. This night they got into an altercation. Nobody really knows what that was about because the friend, whose name is Clint, is not telling what it was about. So it's pure speculation, and all that's known is that there was some kind of disagreement between the two. So he goes out with Clint and Meredith are their names, and he goes to a bar called Ugly Tuna Saloona. Now there's an exit here, and this is one where it starts getting so confusing because people can't agree on the simplest things about this case, like the number of doors and exits. I have heard there's no other way out, can't go anywhere except this first, front way. And then I've heard there's many, so if people can't even agree on the number of doors in a place, then you already know it's going to be kind of a weird case. So he goes in with his friends. They do their thing. They leave at least one time, and they go somewhere else, and then they come back. That part is proven. That part is on camera. It's it's known that they did that. After that, after the second time in, they stay till closing time. Now around 1:55, you can see Brian speaking to a group of girls, and then you never see Brian again. And the story is that man disappears from a bar into thin air and is never seen again. They bring you in by saying he went into the bar and never came out. That's the first leading thing that they'll say, so that you're like, wait a minute, how do you go in and never come out? But after listening to the detectives, they are very sure that he's not still there, that he's not in the wall somewhere like that he did leave that night. And of course, there's more than one exit there. I cannot believe that there's only one exit. I know I used to work in a place like that, and they have to have exits just for, fire hazard safety. They have to have a back exit where you can leave, so that you don't die in a fire. So that to me never even became a theory. Plus, if there was construction going on there, and I guess he could have fallen in somewhere, and I know this stuff does happen, but this place was so looked over and scrutinized, and I just feel like after all this time, wouldn't you feel, smell, find something, people when they deteriorate don't smell good, it's there's stories about, I heard this story about this guy walled up. Somehow he got walled up, and he was seeping stuff out from the wall on the floor. So it just, I just don't think that anybody could be in a building with a person in the wall and not know. I just don't. Possible, maybe, but the cops don't think so, so I don't either. And actually their quote was, let's see, I have to have my little notes on this case, and I have little notes over here to remember exactly what they said. Say, when they're talking about the building, they say, no, absolutely not, and there's just no way. So that doesn't sound unsure to me. That sounds like two people that have, looked and scanned and are satisfied that there's just no way that he could be in there. The river that was nearby, this is also another theory that you hear a lot about. The detective said that with that, he didn't think that was plausible either. It's a 45-minute walk, and that's, again, a distance I heard. I don't know. I only know what I hear. I haven't, been to these places, so I heard a 45-minute walk, but by most accounts, it's a far walk to get to the river from the bar. So the detective said also that he didn't think that that was anything to look into. So, and at that time the river was, the water was slow moving, and he just, the dad and the brothers searched there. So I guess they're really sure that he's not there. So, So that's the story, is that he walked into the bar. He never walked out of the bar on camera. I believe that he left the bar. I think whatever happened to him happened within the next small period of time. And I guess that's where the debate, theory, opinion begins of exactly what happened next. Now, I wanted to look at, and a lot of people, they'll look into like the construction site, things like that. But to me, a lot of this had to do with the person, and I think a lot of other people believe that there's a little bit more to the story. This is anything's possible, but my first instinct was he got into some kind of trouble and there was foul play, or that he committed suicide. I can't just look past the mother part of it. I can't. There are other things that are not so widely spoken about with Brian. Like, he did deal with depression. He had been put on medication for that, and that's not. There are people that have depression and never even think of suicide. Like, that's not to say that that's a true reason for it, but it does. You have to look at it. You have to look at all factors and possibilities. Another thing is that he had spoken with his girlfriend and said that he expressed unhappiness with his life, and of course he would be. He was going through a lot right then. I've lost my mom, and it comes in waves. Like, sometimes you'll be fine, and sometimes it just drops, and you're like, wow, I'm never going to see this person again. So and I feel like death in general kind of makes you look at your own life, and life is short, and do I really want to be am I living the way that I totally want to live? And I think that had something to do with Brian's decisions. I really do. In the way of either wanting to leave or not wanting to live. Now, there are some people that think that he left with the band. There was a band there that night, and he wanted to go talk to the band. So I think that that's possible. They'll say that the band killed him and took him out in their instrument case, and that the restaurant staff killed him and they hit him in the wall or something. That to me never even possible, yeah, but completely unlikely. Totally unlikely. I said yesterday, there's the saying that two may keep a secret if one is dead. So you're going to have to get like a whole band of people together to lie and risk their entire future to cover this up, or, employees at a restaurant to lie for the restaurant. I don't, what do they have to lose or gain by that? I don't think so. Not that many people, I don't feel like, can keep a secret like that, because I don't even think two people could keep a secret like that. I think somebody after a while would break down and tell. There also was a restaurant that had a little roof, a very short roof that he could have jumped out of and just jumped to the ground easily. I think, I always thought, to me, that I never heard enough about that, because you can see that night that he was kind of all over the place, and what if he just decided, hey, I don't want to wait till the crowd files out, I'm just going to go over here and jump out of the window and go that way. I always thought that was a really easy explanation. Like I said, the band, I think it's possible he left with the band, but not that they hurt him. I don't know what the band said, though. I would believe whatever the band said. And by left with the band, I mean like left the same door as them. I don't know if they would have seen him or not, but that would be, I would believe what they said, because it's just too bizarre to think that they have enough invested to lie about something like that. I just don't, that doesn't make sense to me. Two main theories that make sense to me, like I said, are either him choosing to leave, getting involved in an altercation, or him committing suicide. And the choosing to leave, I didn't believe that at all in the beginning, not at all. But the more you dig, the more you find out that there was way more going on behind the scenes than has just been reported all the time. So I'm going to focus on those things and what I found out about those things. So as far as the foul play, somebody doing something to him, which I think is completely likely, that is probably most likely, unfortunately, that, Brian had been out with his friends before and he got punched in the face by somebody it was at a game, and I guess, the guys were like not on the same fans of the same team. And evidently Brian said something that bothered somebody and that he got punched in the face for it. So, Brian was, kind of preppy looking, like you could tell he had a little to drink that night. And it's definite possibility to me that he could have left and some people just been watching, or just see him walking down the street and say, hey, there's the guy we're gonna, take everything from. And that area was horrible for crime. Everyone agrees on that. It was horrible for crime. It was very unsafe. I factor all this stuff in when I'm looking at this because, all the theories on this are drawn from people's thoughts and beliefs and, experiences and what they've known to be true. So, I know when I lived, in my hometown, there was a guy who went missing, and I actually we were there that night, and he was in a VIP section, and I came in just at closing time. I was doing something else, I can't remember, but I came in at closing time, and the person I was coming in there to meet was like, hey, you got to come over here. And he was in the VIP section, the missing guy. And he was I remember he had a wad of money, and it was like this, and he was flipping it. And he was buying drinks for everybody, and I had assumed that they knew each other, but they didn't. There was one other person there that I was with, and then there was another couple. And everybody was sitting in the VIP, and he was buying like champagne for people. And, I assumed everybody knew everybody, but they had never met him before. And, he was just throwing out drinks and money and buying drinks for everybody. Invited everybody to come back to his, loft, and nobody wanted to go because he was so mean, but, or he was being mean. I hate to say that when, the way this ended, but that is what happened. And so, a few weeks later, well, no, not even a few weeks, like maybe a week later, I go and meet this person that I was there with, and they were like, guess what? And I was like, what? And they were like, that guy is missing. No one saw him after that night. And I was like, are you kidding me? Come to find out, a few weeks later, he is found in the canal, and he was robbed that night. And he wanted someone to come home with him, and they just met. He didn't know them, and they robbed him and killed him and put him in the canal. So, it happens, and it seems like in college towns or around places like that it happens more easily, and you just really don't hear about it. It was a big deal in our town. There were flyers everywhere. There was, it was on the news, things like that. So, but it's just, of course I think about that when I think about another guy missing from a bar. you run into that element of the unknown where no one knows who he spoke to or what happened next. No one knows his demeanor. I don't know. I've heard a few different stories about how he was behaving and stuff. And, when everyone's drinking, people, tempers flare, and what could happen there? I don't know. So, robbery, guys fighting, it all seems pretty possible to me. Then my husband watched this show. I forced him to watch it because I was like, what do you think happened? And my husband is in law enforcement, and right after he watched it, he was like, I think someone hit him and threw him in the trunk and drove away. So I was like, yeah, that could definitely be. And then that's why you want to hear other people's opinions, because so many people say things and you're like, wow, that is totally plausible that could have happened. Another thing that he said later was that he thought that he went missing on purpose, and that night that he was too drunk to go missing, so that he waited until he sobered up a little bit, and then he left. Now for me, I really believed for a long time that whatever happened to him right in the span of time leaving that bar, like right within the next 2 hours. Somebody either hurt him or he hurt himself. But the more and more I hear about it, the more, and I know that seems like far-fetched, but the more and more I hear about it, the more I think that he could have left. And as improbable as it is, especially now with, I don't know how you would make it with fingerprints, DNA, social security number. If he's been declared dead, then I don't what happens with that. But I heard by one account that his brother did have him declared dead. So I don't know what happens after that, if people just give up, or law enforcement gives up. It appears that people still look for him, though, and even the detectives say that they still look for him, that they in a crowd they'll still try to find him, because it's that one case that they couldn't solve, and it stays with them. So a few things that were a little less talked about that I needed like a little bit more information to figure out what I thought was going on with this person, because like I said, to me, I think in these cases with missing people, unless they're just pulled off the street, it does have a lot to do with exactly who they are and what they're going through. And Brian had a lot. He had a lot going on, and I feel that Brian was kind of a secretive person. When you look into it, now there's speculation that, well, you'll hear sometimes like he was a med student. He just, he was brilliant. He had it all together. He, this and that. But then you hear that his grades weren't so good, and that he really expressed that he didn't really care about the path he was on. So, and that to me can be kind of shown out too, because of things that he said. He told his girlfriend that he wanted to leave. He asked her to leave with him. He said, do you just want to run away? And then, so it's, and he has a quote on MySpace that says this doctor gig is just temporary until I get my band together, and so that is a funny thing to say. That's a lighthearted thing to say, but when you say things like that, I feel like everything comes from a place of you actually thinking it, like Not how seriously you're taking it, or really, really thinking it. We can't know. I guess there's a lot we didn't know about, his train of thought. And I think everybody's like, I'm ready to take off and go live in a hut on the beach. Everybody feels that way, but these things, they can push somebody to make a major life decision. I find it strange that Brian met with every single person in his life that day. He made a point of going out to eat with his dad, who he was having issues with. I'm not going to get into the things that I've heard, because I think it's wrong to accuse somebody of some things that I heard. And the family is already victimized, so I don't want to go into that, but you can find out. The dad and Brian were going through a strained period, and I think he was really close to his mother, and so that leads you to think, well, the mom is gone, so what if that changed something in his mind? And being a doctor, very much from what everyone said, was his mother's dream for him. And I just wonder, when his mom passed, if he was like, well, I don't have any reason to do this anymore. And grief does strange things to you. Alcohol does strange things. But if he was going to take off, I definitely don't think that's something that he just thought of in one day. I think that was under the radar for a while with him. People might have known about. One thing that I think about that's little, stands out to me, is that in pictures with his parents, and I believe one with his girlfriend too, he's making it's either the I love you symbol, or the devil horn, or the rock on symbol. Now, you can look at his hands in the picture, and he's holding it down by his side. So it's just, to me, it's kind of like a little, like, I don't know, shows that he's like hiding, like he's like, I'm going to put this in here and not be obvious. He's got like something more going on in his head than he's being obvious about, because he's, in this white lab coat, being a doctor, and, doing the, hands out, the devil horn there or whatever. So that, but he, holds it down by his side, so it's not obvious. So I don't know what that means. Just little things like that. Then there's the point of his girlfriend, who people will say, he was gonna marry her. Why would anybody ever leave when they're gonna go on a trip? And they were gonna go on a trip together. And some people say, well, why would he pay for a trip and then not go? But it was a gift from his mom. It was made before. It wasn't, this was before she passed away. So, I think if you're thinking of things as severe as ending your life or starting a new life, a trip with someone is not going to be the thing. You're not going to be like, well, I have this trip, so I can't do it. I don't think that would be a big enough difference to stop somebody. There's rumors that he was going to propose to his girlfriend, and nobody can know what their relationship was like. And I feel just totally sad for her. She must, still wonder what happened. But that wasn't for sure that he was going to do that. That was just something that people had thought. There was no ring. There was nothing like that. So, which you don't always need a ring, but, it seems like somebody would, because that's the norm, is to have a ring, So, and then there's that, he called her that night, and he told her, and this goes along with the saying goodbye to everybody, he told her, And if you listen to this message, it is creepy. You can find it somewhere. There's a podcast. These two guys, it was so good. Like, it only hit like points that haven't been made before. It was a really big deep dive where people had spoken with the family, the investigators, and it was just a lot more that if you're interested in this case, they go really, really well into it. So I'll put it in the description who these guys are, but it's not a lot of filler like blah blah blah. It's the facts quickly, and they get it done pretty soon. So one thing that they said was that things weren't going that great with some members of the family, and then going back to the voicemail, they played the voicemail, and it's pretty creepy to listen to. But he tells her that she's an amazing woman and she's beautiful, and I can't remember word for word, but it was basically that. It was very short, and the way he says bye, to me, I was like, oh, that's a bye. That's a bye. At the same time, so he makes this call to his girlfriend, and then later we can see him on camera giving his number to getting another girl's number, and you can see that he's kind of like brushing up on these girls and stuff. Now that's not really here nor there, but it to me it does show somebody who is like this and then that, like they're kind of all over the place. So I don't know, just little things like that. I don't think you can really ignore. You have to look at all the possibilities. To me, that's not to say that he didn't love his girlfriend or anything, but I just it's just a piece of the puzzle. Amazon just came to the door and I was terrified. I was talking and there was the knock, and we're talking about this. So anyway, I had to take a few deep breaths there. So then another thing about him that was kind of under the radar, if you're doing these deep dives into this, is that one detective or somebody said, or a private investigator said, and I read this on Reddit, so it's not the gospel or anything, but said that he was into some very dark stuff, and I don't know what that means. I don't take that really to mean anything. I mean, people have different ideas of what dark stuff is. They could think that a certain kind of music is dark stuff. I don't know, but I thought that was interesting, and I was like, what's that mean? But it never elaborated any more than that, and it could just be totally made up. I'm sure that there are people that have been like, he was in a cult, or I don't know. They've said everything. They've said aliens. They said he's caught in the vortex. They've said organ harvesting. It seems like people believe anything except for the simplest. Sometimes the simplest answer is the simplest answer. It's like a girl goes missing from a ship and everyone's like, where'd she go? And you're like, it's a ship. So these guys talked about in their podcast too, and I found this interesting, is there are people that do this, that they run off to create a new life, and sometimes they stay missing for years and years. Now I've done a video on this person, and I find this to be one of the most inspirational, I'm taking off stories there is, but his name is Christopher McCandless, and that book had been published, Into the Wild had been published in, I think, 96. So Brian would have, had time to read that. I mean, if he wanted to. But then Brian had a tattoo of Pearl Jam. He was very, very into Pearl Jam. Everybody said that. And that's a huge, I connect with that very much, because growing up, I just loved Pearl Jam. I just absolutely loved them. And anyone who knew me knew that I loved that band. And it's like, it's music that's like more thoughtful. It's not like feel good music. There are some songs that are fast and everything, but it's definitely dealing with some heavy topics, and it's not just like music that you like, think is great to get down to, But anyway, so at that time, Eddie Vedder, who is the lead singer of Pearl Jam, there was a movie for Into the Wild coming out. Now, it had not come out to 2007, but it could have been reported in the news or whatever that Eddie Vedder was a part of that project, and he heard about the McCandless thing from that and decided to pull a Chris McCandless. I don't know. It's possible. I know I read that book, and then I saw the movie, then read the book, and I was like, oh man, I need to go on a trip. But I have a family. I can't do anything like that. But it did really inspire me to take a trip. We actually did go on a trip. We went states, through states. So, you get, and it wasn't all because of that. It was at a time where, it was just a good time to travel. And it actually, my mom had passed away around that time, and, it kind of helped me deal with that and to see, new places and things like that. And, it makes you very introspective when things like that happen. So, I don't know, that's one thing that could be going on. This is all just pure speculation. It's really anybody's guess. So along with that goes the music thing, goes that he had a tattoo. And it's the Stickman from the album from the band. It's very distinct. Not a lot of people, I feel like, would have that, because that was like a 90s thing, that was for at that time, like Nirvana. Everyone knows Nirvana, but back then it was Nirvana and Pearl Jam. Those were the two that you would always think about. I actually got a Pearl Jam tattoo, and I was really, really young, and I dumb, and it's gone now. But so why has that tattoo of his never been spotted? It's not a tattoo that a lot of people would have. I just feel like, he could definitely have covered it up. So, that takes care of that. But at that time, before this all went as far as it did, I was just thinking, like, if he went somewhere warm, that somebody would have seen it on his arm before he, could run to a tattoo parlor and be like, hey, help me out here. And let's just work under the assumption that he did run off. Now, I don't think he could have run off drunk like he was. And most people say that he was, feeling pretty good that night. He was feeling no pain, it looked like on the camera too. So let's, working under the assumption that he did run off, well, it would be so hard to be hidden forever like that. I think that that's possible if he, slept it off, and then just the next day, or even when he was a little bit drunk, maybe thought, I've just had enough. People can only, everybody has their limit. And when there are big changes like that, then I feel like anything's possible if you're a person who has a lot of wanderlust. And Brian did. Everyone agreed on that. And there are some people that are just like that. They just seem to want to go everywhere, and I can understand that. But maybe he felt he was young, he didn't have children, and that he didn't know how to, exit any other way except just to go, and he didn't want to hurt people, so he said goodbye. I don't know. But the fact that there's never been any sightings that have really panned out, that seems to contradict that. But then, I mean, you hear about people coming back after so many years. So, you know, and the police themselves have said that they don't have any reason to believe that he's not alive. They've never found any evidence that he's not alive. So, definitely not likely, but anything's possible. And I guess it depends on what you know, if I'm going for reality, then I believe, unfortunately, something happened to him that night, whether by his own hand or somebody else. But if I want to go to like total faith and just, you know, what would be great to happen, then yeah, it would be great that he was just on a beach somewhere, like living life and happy. Because he's not, even though it's mean, people are allowed to disappear. And so that if he did just take off, then this happened. How do you ever come back? You know, how do you, when there are podcasts about you, there are numerous news specials made on you. It's been online that CNN's gonna do something again about him. How do you ever come back? You know, how do you say, oh, I was just taking a break, just kidding, you know? And this was April Fool's. Like that'd be the major April Fool's for like everybody ever. Too, along those lines, is that he had a tuition check from his dad for school and never cashed a check, and he even missed the deadline to turn it in. Now, why would you not pay your tuition, you know, unless you knew you weren't going to go to school anymore? You know, there's things like that I don't understand why it's just such an important thing to pay. Like it's not a med student saying I don't need to pay my tuition. I think that's just a little too strange to be a coincidence. You know, we just don't know. But you know, he was late to his own mom's funeral, so I just think there's so much more going on under the surface that needs to be looked at about the subject of the case than the surrounding circumstances. I think it has everything to do with that. I don't think you can just take that out of this story. It's just too weird. I think there's so many ways the evidence could take you in this case. I remember being a kid and seeing Unsolved Mysteries, which like scared the life out of me. And even today, I have a really hard time. I get scared by this stuff. Like I'll watch it at night and then run to my bedroom and go get in bed and like wake my husband up and stuff. And he's like, just stop watching that stuff. But you know, anyway, that's not much, but anyway, I saw Unsolved Mysteries, and there was this Jeep, and these two people got into it together, and they disappeared off the face of the planet, and you're thinking, like, well, how is this possible, and, you know, where did this go or that go, you know, and there were all these little details that went with it, but, you know, they'll have, like, update, and then the update comes on, and they were under the bridge. Their Jeep was under the bridge the whole time. They fell in the water, and that was it. I mean, so sometimes the most simple explanation is the most probable explanation. You really have to start knowing all the facts before you get into the theories, because it won't make any sense to you unless you kind of like really, you know, yeah, I guess what anybody thinks is their conclusion that they come up with the evidence. I don't know. Will we ever know? I don't know. I hope, you know, like I said, to me it's unlikely that it's a happy ending, unfortunately, because none of us want to see anybody, fellow human being, be hurt or lost like that, especially when so many people do care about what happened. Most of all, his brother, you know, who could have some kind of closure from this, and one family member back. So realistic me is gonna probably go with that it's not looking too good. But the faithful, like the part that's just optimistic, and I like to believe the best. In this world, you can't always believe that, but I would like to believe that the guy is playing a guitar on a beach somewhere and happy. And I don't know, maybe we'll find out one day.